Millionaire CEO ignores a homeless man begging outside his office until he hears him whisper his childhood nickname. Ethan Blake surveyed his kingdom from the panoramic windows of his corner office. Below him, the city of Chicago sprawled, a concrete and glass tapestry woven with the threads of commerce, ambition, and the relentless pursuit of success. Ethan, at 48, was the CEO of Blake Enterprises, a multinational corporation he had built from the ground up, transforming a small tech startup into a global powerhouse. He was a man of power, of influence, of wealth beyond measure. His office was a testament to his achievements. Sleek modern furniture, original artwork, a breathtaking view, and an array of awards and accolades that lined the walls. It was a space designed to impress, to intimidate, to reinforce his position at the apex of the corporate hierarchy. His days were a carefully orchestrated routine, a precisely calibrated sequence of meetings, conference calls, and strategic decisions. He thrived on pressure, on the challenge of outmaneuvering his competitors, on the adrenaline rush of closing a deal. He was a master of his domain, a man in complete control, or so he believed. Yet, despite his outward success, Ethan felt a growing emptiness within him, a sense of isolation that his wealth and power couldn't alleviate. His marriage had ended in divorce years ago. His relationship with his adult children was strained, and his social interactions were largely confined to the superficial pleasantries of the business world. He had become detached, disconnected from the human element, insulated from the realities of life outside his corporate bubble. He saw the world through the prism of profit and loss, of efficiency and productivity, of winners and losers. Every morning, as he arrived at his office building, a gleaming glass tower that bore his name, he would encounter the same scene. A small group of homeless people huddled near the entrance, seeking shelter from the elements, begging for spare change. Their presence, a stark reminder of the inequalities that existed just beyond the polished doors of his corporate sanctuary. Ethan would avert his gaze, his pace quickening, his expression hardening. He had trained himself to ignore them, to see them as an inconvenience, an eyesore, a problem to be solved by someone else. He had convinced himself that they were responsible for their own misfortunes, that they had made poor choices, that they were somehow less deserving of his attention, his empathy, his humanity. He would donate money to homeless to show that he cares. He would enter the building, the glass doors sliding shut behind him, sealing him off from the messy, unpredictable realities of the outside world. He would ride the elevator to his penthouse office, his thoughts already consumed by the day's agenda, his mind focused on the next deal, the next conquest, the next opportunity to expand his empire. He had become a master of avoidance, of compartmentalization, of separating his personal life from his professional life, his emotions from his ambitions. He had built walls around his heart, protecting himself from vulnerability, from connection, from the messy, unpredictable realities of human relationships. His routine was a shield, a defense mechanism, a way of maintaining control in a world that often felt chaotic and overwhelming. But it was also a prison, a self-imposed exile from the very things that gave life meaning: connection, compassion, and the shared experience of being human. The CEO's world was a world of privilege and power, but it was also a world of isolation and emotional detachment, a world that was about to be shattered by a single, whispered word, a word that would bridge the chasm between his present and his past, a word that would force him to confront the man he had become and the boy he had once been. The morning was like any other. The Chicago wind whipped through the concrete canyons, carrying with it the chill of early autumn. Ethan Blake, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his silver hair neatly combed, his expression unreadable, strode towards the entrance of Blake Enterprises. He ignored the usual cluster of homeless people huddled near the revolving doors, their presence a familiar, if unwelcome, fixture of his daily routine. He had become adept at avoiding eye contact, at tuning out their pleas for help, at steeling himself against any flicker of empathy that might threaten his carefully constructed detachment. He was mentally reviewing his schedule for the day: a board meeting, a conference call with investors, a lunch with a potential client, his mind already immersed in the world of finance and strategy. As he approached the entrance, he heard a voice, a hoarse whisper that barely registered above the din of the city. He ignored it, assuming it was another request for money, another plea for assistance that he had trained himself to disregard. But then, he heard it again, a faint, raspy voice that uttered a single, two-word phrase that cut through his carefully constructed defenses, a phrase that stopped him in his tracks, a phrase that sent a jolt of recognition through him, a phrase that transported him back to his childhood, to a time and a place he had long tried to forget. Lazy cat. Ethan froze. His heart skipped a beat. His breath caught in his throat. He slowly turned, his eyes scanning the faces of the homeless people, searching for the source of the voice. The nickname, it was a name only one person had ever called him. A name from his distant past. A name that belonged to a friendship he had long abandoned. A friendship he had thought lost forever. His gaze fell upon a man huddled against the building, wrapped in layers of tattered clothing, his face obscured by a matted beard and a grimy baseball cap. The man was thin, emaciated, his eyes sunken and bloodshot, his skin weathered and rough. He looked like a shadow of a human being, a ghost of a life lived on the margins. But there was something in his eyes, something in the way he looked at Ethan, something that sparked a flicker of recognition, a glimmer of familiarity. Ethan approached him cautiously, his mind reeling, his emotions a chaotic mix of disbelief, confusion, and a growing sense of dread. Who are you?" Ethan asked, his voice trembling. The man looked up at him, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness, resignation, and a flicker of hope. He slowly raised a trembling hand, pointing a shaky finger at Ethan. "Lazy cat," he whispered again, his voice raspy and weak. Don't you remember me?" Ethan stared at him, his mind racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. He studied the man's features, searching for any trace of the boy he had once known, the friend he had lost. And then he saw it. A small scar above the man's left eyebrow. A scar he remembered vividly. A scar that was the result of a childhood accident, an accident that had nearly cost his friend his life. Recognition dawned, sudden and overwhelming. It couldn't be. But it was. "Tommy," Ethan whispered, his voice filled with disbelief. "Tommy, is that really you?" The man nodded, a single tear tracing a path down his grimy cheek. "It's me, Ethan," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "It's me." The encounter was a moment of profound emotional impact, a collision of two vastly different worlds. The CEO, the man of power and privilege, confronted by the homeless man, the embodiment of poverty and despair. The past, long buried, resurrected in the present. The nickname, a seemingly insignificant detail, was the key, the trigger, the password that unlocked a flood of memories, of emotions, of a connection that had been severed but not destroyed. The whisper, barely audible above the noise of the city, was a cry for help, a plea for recognition, a testament to the enduring power of friendship, even in the face of unimaginable hardship. The scene was not just about a chance encounter. It was about the shattering of illusions, the confrontation with reality, and the beginning of a journey of redemption and reconciliation. The name, the scar, the whispered nickname, it all flooded back. Memories, long suppressed, buried beneath layers of ambition and self-preservation, surged to the surface, vivid and powerful. Ethan was no longer standing in front of his corporate headquarters, a titan of industry. He was a boy again, back in the small town of Havenwood, Ohio, where he had grown up, a world away from the skyscrapers and boardrooms of his present life. He remembered Tommy, not the broken, emaciated man before him, but the vibrant, energetic boy who had been his inseparable companion, his confidant, his best friend. They had been inseparable, two halves of a whole, sharing secrets, dreams, and adventures. He remembered their childhood escapades, building forts in the woods, exploring the creek that ran behind their houses, playing baseball in the dusty field behind the school. They had been two mischievous boys, full of energy and a shared sense of adventure. Their days filled with laughter, exploration, and the unwavering certainty of their friendship. The nickname Lazy Cat came from one particular incident, a summer afternoon spent by the creek. Ethan, always the more cautious of the two, had been hesitant to jump across a particularly wide section of the water. Tommy, fearless and impulsive, had teased him, calling him Lazy Cat, daring him to take the leap. Ethan, spurred on by the challenge, had finally jumped, making it across safely, but not without a healthy dose of fear. The nickname had stuck, a symbol of their contrasting personalities, but also of their deep affection for each other. And then he remembered the accident, the event that had solidified their bond, the event that had made Tommy a hero in Ethan's eyes, the event that, ironically, had also set them on the divergent paths that had led to this moment. They had been swimming in the old quarry, a forbidden place, known for its deep, cold water and treacherous currents. Ethan, a weaker swimmer than Tommy, had ventured out too far, caught in a sudden undertow. He had panicked, struggling against the current, his lungs burning, his strength failing. Tommy, seeing his friend in distress, had dived in without hesitation, swimming against the powerful current, reaching Ethan just as he was about to go under. He had pulled him to safety, risking his own life to save his friend. Ethan had always felt indebted to Tommy, grateful for his courage, his selflessness, his unwavering loyalty. He had vowed to repay him, to always be there for him, to never forget what he had done. But life, as it often does, had intervened. Ethan's family had moved away, seeking better opportunities in the city. The two boys had promised to stay in touch, to remain friends, but the distance, the passage of time, and the diverging paths of their lives had gradually eroded their connection. Ethan had become consumed by his ambition, his drive to succeed, his need to prove himself worthy of the opportunities he had been given. He had excelled in school, attended a prestigious university, and embarked on a meteoric rise through the corporate ranks. He had, in his pursuit of success, forgotten the promises he had made, the friendships he had cherished, the simple joys of his childhood. He had occasionally thought about Tommy, wondering what had become of him, but he had always pushed those thoughts aside, telling himself that he was too busy, that he had no time for the past, that he needed to focus on the future. Now, standing before the man who had once been his closest friend, the man who had saved his life, Ethan was overwhelmed by a wave of guilt, of shame, of regret. He saw the toll that life had taken on Tommy, the hardship, the suffering, the despair etched on his face. He saw the consequences of his own neglect, his own ambition, his own failure to live up to the promises he had made as a boy. The flashbacks were not just a nostalgic trip down memory lane. They were a painful reckoning, a confrontation with his own conscience, a realization of the price of his success, an enduring power of a friendship he had allowed to wither and die. The recognition of Tommy was not just a moment of surprise. It was a moment of truth, a moment that would force Ethan to reevaluate his life, his values, and his priorities. The memories, triggered by a single word, were the key to unlocking his own humanity, to reminding him of the boy he had once been and the man he now wanted to become. The decision was instantaneous, instinctive, born of a mixture of guilt, remorse, and a rekindled sense of loyalty. Ethan couldn't leave Tommy there, on the street, broken and alone. He couldn't turn his back on the man who had once saved his life. "Tommy," Ethan said, his voice firm, "you're coming home with me." Tommy looked at him, his eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and suspicion. He had been living on the streets for years, accustomed to indifference, to rejection, to the casual cruelty of strangers. He couldn't comprehend this sudden offer of help, this unexpected act of kindness. "What?" Tommy asked, his voice hoarse. You mean it?" "Yes," Ethan said. "I mean it. You're not staying here another night. You're coming home with me." He helped Tommy to his feet, supporting his weight, his arm around his shoulders. Tommy was weak, unsteady, his body ravaged by years of hardship and neglect. Ethan signaled to his driver, who had been watching the scene unfold with a mixture of confusion and concern. The driver, a stoic man named Johnson, opened the back door of the limousine, his expression carefully neutral. Getting Tommy into the car was a struggle. He was disoriented, confused, and resistant, his instincts honed by years of survival on the streets. He didn't understand what was happening, why this wealthy stranger was suddenly offering him help. "It's okay, Tommy," Ethan said, his voice soothing. "It's me, Ethan. Lazy cat. Remember? I'm going to take care of you." The familiar nickname seemed to calm Tommy, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. He allowed himself to be guided into the car, sinking into the plush leather seats, his body overwhelmed by the unfamiliar comfort. The drive to Ethan's penthouse apartment was silent, filled with an unspoken tension. Ethan watched Tommy, his heart aching with a mixture of pity and guilt. He saw the ravages of time and hardship on his friend's face, the lines of suffering, the haunted look in his eyes. He realized the magnitude of the task ahead, the challenges he would face in helping Tommy rebuild his life. He knew it wouldn't be easy, that there would be setbacks, obstacles, and potentially resistance from Tommy himself. When they arrived at the penthouse, Ethan's staff was visibly shocked. The sight of the disheveled, homeless man entering their meticulously maintained world was jarring, unsettling. Ethan ignored their stares, their whispered comments, his focus solely on Tommy. He led Tommy to a guest room, a spacious, luxurious suite that was a stark contrast to the streets he had been living on. He showed him the bathroom, offering him clean clothes, toiletries, and a hot shower. Tommy was overwhelmed, bewildered by the opulence, by the sudden change in his circumstances. He moved slowly, cautiously, as if afraid to touch anything, afraid to believe that this was real. This is all yours," Tommy asked, his voice filled with awe. "For now," Ethan said. "It's yours. You can stay here as long as you need to." He left Tommy to shower, giving him some privacy, some time to adjust to his new surroundings. He knew that the first step was to address Tommy's immediate needs: food, shelter, medical attention. But he also knew that the real challenge would be addressing the underlying issues, the root causes of Tommy's homelessness, the demons that had haunted him for so long. He called his personal physician, Dr. Adams, requesting an urgent house call. He explained the situation, emphasizing Tommy's precarious health and the need for a thorough examination. As he waited for the doctor to arrive, Ethan felt a mix of emotions: anxiety, anticipation, and a growing sense of determination. He was committed to helping Tommy, to repaying the debt he owed him, to making amends for the years of neglect. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was prepared to do whatever it took. He had taken Tommy in, not just into his home, but into his life, and he was determined to make a difference, to help his friend reclaim his dignity, his health, and his future. The initial challenges were just the beginning of a long and arduous journey, a journey of recovery, of reconciliation, and of the rebuilding of a friendship that had been shattered but not destroyed. The first few weeks were a delicate dance of adjustment, of tentative trust-building, and of navigating the vast chasm that separated Ethan's world of privilege from Tommy's world of hardship. Dr. Adams's initial assessment confirmed what Ethan already suspected. Tommy was suffering from malnutrition, dehydration, and a host of other ailments stemming from years of living on the streets. He also showed signs of a substance abuse problem, though he was initially reluctant to admit it. Ethan, with Dr. Adams's guidance, established a routine for Tommy: regular meals, a comfortable bed, clean clothes, and a regimen of medication to address his physical ailments. He also arranged for a therapist specializing in addiction and trauma to visit Tommy regularly. The initial sessions with the therapist, Dr. Ramirez, were difficult. Tommy was withdrawn, suspicious, and resistant to opening up. He had built walls around his heart, defenses against the pain and disappointment of his life. He was ashamed of his situation, embarrassed by his dependence on Ethan, and fearful of judgment. Ethan, however, was patient and persistent. He spent hours with Tommy, simply talking, sharing stories, reminiscing about their childhood, gradually chipping away at the walls of resistance. He didn't push, he didn't pry. He simply offered his presence, his support, his unwavering friendship. He learned to listen, to truly listen, to Tommy's silences as well as his words, to understand the unspoken pain, the fear, the shame that he carried within him. He learned to be patient, to allow Tommy to heal at his own pace, to respect his boundaries, to offer his support without judgment or expectation. Slowly, gradually, Tommy began to open up. He started to talk about his struggles, his demons, his lost dreams. He shared stories of his life on the streets, the constant struggle for survival, the violence, the loneliness, the despair. He confessed to his addiction, admitting that it had been both a cause and a consequence of his homelessness, a way of numbing the pain, of escaping the harsh realities of his existence. Ethan listened without judgment, offering his support, his understanding, and his unwavering commitment to helping Tommy overcome his addiction. He arranged for Tommy to enter a rehabilitation program, a residential facility that specialized in treating substance abuse and mental health issues. Tommy was initially resistant, fearful of the unknown, of the challenges that lay ahead. But Ethan, drawing on their shared history, on the bond they had forged as children, convinced him to give it a try. "Remember when I was afraid to jump across the creek, Tommy?" Ethan said. "You call me lazy cat. You dare me to take the leap. Well, now it's your turn. You need to take this leap, Tommy. For yourself, for your future. And I'll be right there beside you, just like you were there for me." Tommy, touched by Ethan's words, by his unwavering faith in him, agreed to enter the program. The rehabilitation process was long and arduous, filled with setbacks and challenges. There were times when Tommy wanted to give up, to retreat back into the familiar comfort of his addiction, to escape the pain of confronting his past. But Ethan was there for him every step of the way. He visited him regularly, offering his encouragement, his support, his unwavering belief in his ability to recover. He attended family therapy sessions with Tommy, working through their shared history, addressing the unresolved issues that had contributed to their estrangement. Slowly, gradually, Tommy began to heal. He started to confront his demons, to address the trauma that had haunted him for so long, to develop coping mechanisms for dealing with his addiction. He began to rediscover his self-worth, his dignity, his hope for the future. The process of rebuilding their friendship was intertwined with Tommy's recovery. As Tommy healed, the bond between them strengthened, deepened, becoming more resilient than ever before. They were no longer just childhood friends, separated by time and circumstance. They were two men, bound by a shared past, a shared struggle, and a shared commitment to building a better future. Bridging the gap was not just about providing material support. It was about rebuilding trust, fostering understanding, and rekindling a friendship that had been tested by time and adversity, but had ultimately endured. As Tommy progressed in his recovery, gaining strength both physically and emotionally, Ethan felt a growing need to understand the full story of his friend's descent into homelessness. He knew that Tommy's addiction was a significant factor, but he suspected there were other, deeper reasons behind his long years on the streets. He encouraged Tommy to talk about his past, to share the events that had led him to this point. It was a slow, painful process, requiring patience, empathy, and a willingness to confront difficult truths. Tommy, initially reluctant, gradually began to open up, revealing fragments of his story, pieces of a puzzle that Ethan was determined to assemble. He learned that after the family rift and Ethan's departure, Tommy had struggled to find his place in the world. He had drifted from job to job, never finding anything that truly engaged him, never feeling a sense of purpose or belonging. He had fallen in with the wrong crowd, experimenting with drugs, and quickly developing an addiction that consumed his life. He had lost his job, his apartment, and his connections to the few remaining friends and family he had. But there was one event, one specific incident that Tommy had been particularly hesitant to discuss, an event that seemed to be the turning point, the moment when he had truly lost hope. It took weeks of gentle prodding, of building trust, of creating a safe space for Tommy to share his most painful memories before he finally revealed the truth. He had been working as a construction worker, a job he had found through a friend, a job that had offered him a glimmer of hope, a chance to rebuild his life. But the construction company was corrupt, involved in illegal activities, and Tommy had stumbled upon evidence of their wrongdoing. He had tried to report it, to expose the corruption, but he had been threatened, intimidated, and ultimately framed for a crime he didn't commit. He had been arrested, convicted, and sentenced to a short prison term. The experience had shattered him. He had lost his job, his reputation, and his faith in the system. He had emerged from prison a broken man, with no resources, no support, and no hope for the future. He had quickly spiraled downwards, succumbing to his addiction, losing himself in the anonymity of the streets, becoming just another nameless, faceless statistic in the city's growing homeless population. Ethan listened to Tommy's story, his heart aching with a mixture of anger, grief, and a profound sense of injustice. He realized that Tommy's homelessness was not simply the result of personal failings or bad choices. It was the result of systemic failures, of corruption, of a society that often ignored or marginalized its most vulnerable members. He decided to investigate, to uncover the truth behind the construction company's illegal activities and Tommy's wrongful conviction. He hired a private investigator, the same one he had used before, providing him with Tommy's information and directing him to focus on the company's past dealings. The investigator, after weeks of digging, uncovered a trail of evidence, falsified documents, bribed officials, and a pattern of intimidation and violence used to silence anyone who threatened to expose their crimes. He also discovered that the construction company had ties to organized crime, that it was part of a larger network of illegal activities that extended far beyond the city of Chicago. Ethan, armed with this information, contacted the authorities, sharing the investigators' findings and demanding a full investigation. He used his influence, his connections, and his resources to ensure that the case was taken seriously, that the perpetrators were brought to justice. The investigation led to a series of arrests, indictments, and convictions. The construction company was shut down, its owners and executives facing lengthy prison sentences. Tommy's conviction was overturned, his record cleared, his name finally restored. Facing the past was not just about uncovering the truth. It was about righting a wrong, about seeking justice for Tommy, and about exposing the systemic failures that had contributed to his downfall. It was a painful but necessary process, a step towards healing, towards closure, and towards building a future free from the shadows of the past. The overturning of Tommy's conviction was a pivotal moment, a turning point in his recovery and a validation of Ethan's unwavering support. It was a public acknowledgement of the injustice he had suffered, a restoration of his dignity, and a symbol of hope for the future. Tommy, with Ethan's continued support, remained committed to his sobriety, attending regular therapy sessions, participating in support groups, and working diligently to rebuild his life. He secured a job, initially part-time, at a local community center, assisting with maintenance and landscaping. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest work, and it provided him with a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging, and a sense of self-worth. He moved out of Ethan's penthouse and into a small, modest apartment, a place of his own, a space where he could reclaim his independence and rebuild his life on his own terms. Ethan and Tommy's friendship, rekindled after years of separation, continued to deepen and evolve. They spent time together regularly, sharing meals, attending sporting events, and simply talking, catching up on lost time, and forging a new bond based on mutual respect, shared experience, and a deep, abiding affection. Ethan, profoundly changed by his reunion with Tommy and his journey through the complexities of homelessness, addiction, and systemic injustice, underwent a significant personal transformation. He realized that his wealth and power were meaningless if not used to help others, to make a difference in the world, to address the inequalities that had contributed to Tommy's downfall. He became a vocal advocate for social justice, using his platform and his resources to support organizations that provided assistance to the homeless, to fight for affordable housing, and to promote policies that address the root causes of poverty and inequality. He established a foundation in Tommy's name, dedicated to providing resources and support for individuals struggling with addiction, homelessness, and wrongful convictions. He became a mentor to young people from disadvantaged backgrounds, sharing his story, his mistakes, and his lessons learned, inspiring them to overcome adversity and pursue their dreams. He also made significant changes within his own company, implementing fair labor practices, investing in employee well-being, and creating opportunities for individuals from marginalized communities. He transformed Blake Enterprises from a purely profit-driven entity into a socially responsible corporation, a model for ethical business practices and a force for positive change in the community. The relationship between Ethan and Tommy became a symbol of hope, of redemption, of the transformative power of friendship, and of the possibility of overcoming even the most daunting of challenges. Their story was featured in newspapers and magazines, inspiring others to reach out, to connect, to make a difference in the lives of those around them. Years later, Ethan and Tommy sat together on a park bench, watching children play, their laughter echoing through the air. They were older now, their faces lined with the wrinkles of time, but their bond remained strong, their friendship unwavering. "I never thought," Tommy said, his voice filled with emotion, "that I'd get a second chance. I thought I was lost, forgotten. You saved my life, Ethan." "Again." Ethan smiled, placing a hand on Tommy's shoulder. "You saved mine too, Tommy," he said. "You reminded me of what's truly important. You showed me the meaning of friendship, of loyalty, of compassion. You helped me become a better man." They sat in silence for a moment, their gaze fixed on the children, their hearts filled with gratitude, with peace, with a profound sense of fulfillment. They had both been given a second chance, a chance to rebuild their lives, to repair their mistakes, and to forge a future filled with hope, with purpose, and with the enduring power of a friendship that had withstood the test of time and adversity. The transformation was not just about Tommy's recovery. It was about Ethan's awakening, his realization that true success was not measured in wealth or power, but in the impact you have on the lives of others, in the connections you forge, and in the legacy of kindness and compassion you leave behind. The story, ultimately, was a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit, the resilience of friendship, and the transformative potential that lies within each of us to overcome adversity, to learn from our mistakes, and to build a better world, one connection, one act of kindness at a time.